Welcome to Garvey's Ghost TV, January 9, 2022. A Sunday broadcast. Snow got me, so I couldn't broadcast Friday. So here we are, Sunday. Hopefully we'll keep this brief as we discuss some of the rising tyranny going on. If I'm not as humorous as I usually am, and forgive me, because I was listening to the Supreme Court oral arguments, and I'm not feeling good about it. You'll see in my latest posting in Garvey's Ghost blog that my issue is that we start from personal liberty and personal decisions about our medical care and go up from there. And this whole thing in the Supreme Court is top down. And, we had Sotomayor, who made a bold, false statement of 100,000 children in the ICU with ventilators, which, as far as I know, never got corrected by any of the lawyers or other justices. We had Breyer, who said there were 750 million new cases in America, where the population of the United States is 330 million. So he said twice the amount of people were infected than actually exist. And you could say that it's a slip up, but I've never made that mistake. And as soon as it popped out of my mouth, I would have been like, no, man, 750,000. If that's the correct number. I don't know what the correct number. I know it's high, but then there was, I believe it was Gorsuch, who basically said what I've been warning about, that they agree that the states have this right, and that even if they strike this down, you're at the whim of the states rather than the state. And so if you're in New York, California, Illinois, I don't know, then you're at the whim of the governor there, and New Jersey, and they'll just do what you want to do. And for states that don't have governors or legislators that are okay with that, you're just one election away from them changing their minds. So that's a precarious situation, and that's why I'm not that really hopeful, to be honest. And it changes a lot of my own plans. So if you're one of those people that got who are waiting, I would be assuming that you're going to need remote work at best. But that's my opinion. Before I go on, subscribe. And if you want to support, you can Zelle me. Also, these videos will be posted on BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey. And the links should be in the description, so you can look over there. And this hasn't been posted to the blog, so I'll post this to the blog when it's done. And without further ado, we're going to get to the first point, which is Eric Adams alert. Now, I told you I am not sanguine on Eric Adams, because my test for him was day one, drop the mandates. And when he didn't do that day one, it's a wash for me. But now we see where he's going. And what he's doing now, come on. New York City Mayor, there's two things from him. He's going to sign a law allowing non-citizens to vote. Now, I'm of the opinion that no serious country allows non-citizens to vote for anything. But I'm going to be fair because there's a point in this article here. A handful of localities across the United States, including 11 towns in Maryland and 2 in Vermont, permit non-citizens to participate in their elections. So this is really not Adams. This is something that's been creeping in other states, and people are just finding out about it. And since they haven't been challenged, I don't see how you're going to get yourself out of this without legislative action. But no serious country would allow this. The argument being that since you live there, you should have a say. And fine, if I were China, Russia, I would just send citizens to grant residency and then vote for people. And people say, oh, this is just the local elections. Well, a lot of people get into a higher office by first getting into the lower offices. So once you get in, the power of incumbency and name recognition starts to fall up. And that's why incumbents enjoy a huge advantage. Unless they totally mess up or totally unpopular, incumbents have a huge advantage over newcomers. So what this allows you to do is to get people on the ground floor and then work their way up in the system. So you go from school board to city council. And then you go from city council to congressional seat. But you just need to get in the door. And that's what this does. And nothing's good could come out of that. And trust me, they're not trying to stop at just municipal or local elections. They have bigger plans for that. But it's step by step. You don't go from no voting to vote for the president. They know that won't fly. So they got to get it in and then just say, well, what was so bad about this? And they pay taxes and they're law abiding and therefore, doom. And I think in this case, under de Blasio, they were saying that the Constitution of New York State allows it. Now, the federal Constitution, in terms of elections, particularly for federal elections, allows the states to decide how elections happen. So as far as I can see, and I could be wrong, they can step this up for higher and higher offices. So they might not be able to get into the U.S. Congress, but don't be surprised you start seeing state senators, state representatives, and the like, sheriff and judges, where those things are elected, that start to sweep out. That's what's coming down. The last thing about Mr. Eric Adams is he's come for the children now. So he's on board with mandating the shots for children to go to school. So again, he's a player. And what he did is I kind of peeped this, was what he did is he stayed quiet up to the election, and then he stayed quiet in the last days of de Blasio. And there are two ways to take that. He didn't want to conflict with person who's in office, which I think is good. I think there's only one mayor, there's one president. Anyone else shouldn't say whatever, especially contradictory stuff, until that person is gone. But the other way to see it was that he agreed with it, and he just didn't want to say it just then. But now he's in office, he can say it. There's nothing you can do about it. And that's what we're up to. They're going to get your kids. Hope you're prepared for that. So, next thing I want to get into is Djokovic. I happen to have gone to the U.S. Open a couple of years back. I think Nadal. He may have been playing Djokovic, but I saw the men's final, and so I kind of follow tennis, but it's not really my thing. I'm into bike racing. But this thing with Djokovic and Australia, number one, I don't think it was accidental that they let him get in a plane and fly as long as it takes to get to Australia, to then say, oops, you don't have the exemption and you got to either leave the country or stay and appeal the decision. And that's why he's still there. He's been free to leave. And there was another female tennis player who also got hemmed up like that, and she left. But Djokovic wants to fight it. But I think the Australian authorities been playing very underhandedly with him, and Djokovic is going through the motions, and I get it. But the thing with this I saw, which is interesting, was this one at the bottom, right? This here, right? The government also challenged Djokovic's claim for a medical exemption on the basis that he had contracted COVID-19 in mid-December and had recovered 2 weeks later. Okay. There is no suggestion that the applicant had acute major medical illness in December 2021. All he has said is that he tested positive for COVID-19. This is not the same. Now, that's interesting because current Australian authorities will lock you up if you are a close contact of someone who tested positive but did not have, quote, acute major medical illness. They will lock you up on a rolling basis. You can't even take a walk in their their detention camp. If you are just close contact and you tested negative, that's how they act from a simple close contact. But Djokovic, showing that he was at once positive, is now negative because he wasn't laid up in a hospital with a tube down his neck, is not good enough. He wasn't sick enough. Now, if I was an Australian, I'd be upset at this. Because you do all these things based on positive PCR. And yet, here's someone who had positive PCR, apparently did not have a severe case or even a mild case, Most of the cases are asymptomatic. That's according to Worldometers. But because he didn't have a major case, he can't come in. But y'all can be dragged out your home, and I've seen, and put in a detention camp for undisclosed amount of time, and have your stay extended for doing things like taking a walk without permission over a positive PCR. You should be upset at that if you're an Australian. But no, you're too bad, too much spending time being mad at Djokovic because all he had to do was just take the shot. I was reading or watching or listening. I go through so much media, I can't remember which one. But one of his compatriots were like, well, I'm not sympathetic to Djokovic because he should just do what every other responsible player did and just took the shot. That's what we are today. We're responsible. Yeah, let me tell you this thing. Go back in some black history. They used to use this word responsible Negro. You have responsible Negro leadership. And whenever I see this term responsible, I know there's a setup. Because when they were talking about responsible Negro leadership, what they meant is leadership, Negro leadership that was compliant with the system of segregation or slavery, if we took it that far back. Right? So responsible Negro leadership was ones who didn't rock the boat, who stayed with the status quo, and didn't rock the boat with the races. They didn't make friction with the races because the races are happy with the black folk over there. Right? So then they use this term, responsible Negroes. So whenever you see someone use this phrase, being responsible, what they mean is being compliant with those in power. That's what that actually means. So when you see these people, you should know that's code word, that's code language. And they use that because in your mind, you hear responsible. And so you know the inverse, automatically saying not doing this, in this case, taking a shot, is irresponsible. You wouldn't want to be irresponsible, would you? So that's what's going on there. So don't be irresponsible, Negro. So I'm going to move on. Let's talk about this other thing. I have long warned. I'll say long. I wrote about this back when, I want to say 2020, but further along into 20, like late 2020, when the police, first of all, when Antifa was running around doing his thing, and they were attacking police, and the police were like, we needed people to back us, so it was the whole back the blue thing. But then they started enforcing these mandates, closing down people's businesses, and people were running underground clubs, and they wanted to stop people crossing the bridges from New Jersey into New York, to check if you had a out-of-state license, to check if you had a good enough reason to enter New York. And I was just like, what's going to happen is all those people, or a good percentage of them, that were backing the blue, are going to see these police officers as the state agents, enforcement agents that they are. That they're not here to uphold the law, but rather they're more interested in protecting themselves as a department and then protecting the state that pays them. And you would see this joining of dissident citizens who previously did not support Antifa link up with Antifa. Because although Antifa has a different reason for being anti-police, they will merge based on the common view that the police are agents of tyranny. So here we have an article. Antifa joins protests against vaccine tyranny in France as President Emmanuel Macron institutes medical apartheid. Now, this is what I was saying was going to happen. The left, the right link up based on a common disdain for tyranny. And the thing is, Antifa has already shown that it's willing to do violence. And one thing that hasn't been, even though you have all this media lies, propaganda about right-wing people aren't violent. I mean, if you understand the amount of guns and other weapons that right-wing people have, if they were into violence, there'd be bodies everywhere. So they're not particularly violent, but they are capable. And I think the feds know this. And I think right now they're going to stay generally nonviolent. The same thing can't be said for Antifa. And the first shift that's going to happen is right wing no longer having conflicts with Antifa. You just let them go and do whatever they do. And unless they're in a jurisdiction where the police are also anti-tyranny, then they'll have the support of so-called right-wing organizations or people. But in places where the police are not liked by the right wing or the left wing, there's going to be a lot of problems. So you see cases where police are getting shot while sitting in their car, and the response is kind of like, see, I remember when the Black Lives Matter spawned the guy that I think he came from Maryland and came up and shot 2 police officers, and it just time it report after report, and everybody was on this. This latest woman, I think is Baltimore, or New York, whatever, shot in the head. And there were a few things, but nowhere near the amount of outrage. And that's a clue of what's going on. A lot of police are losing support of the general population due to its enforcement of these mandates. And it's going to get worse, because this is going to get worse. But don't be surprised when you see this Antifa left, right joining against this vaccine tyranny that's going on, especially when you have leaders like Macron, who basically called non-vaccinated French people non-citizens. They're just open with it. The proverbial mask is down. Speaking of, the knife has still not gotten up and stabbed me. Remember, we're watching to see if the inanimate object that has been ordered, you will stab me, ordered to stab me. Put it back down. Okay. So we have that, and that's an important thing to understand, that there's going to be a joining, especially if you do more and more oppression. And speaking of which, here's our next one. Now, if you recall, I had done a video talking about New York State's proposed law about quarantining medical COVID patients, but it could be any infectious disease. And I noted that such laws already exist in New Jersey. And so here's another example. Another example. In Washington State, authorized a strike force to involuntarily detain unvaccinated families. They've already set up the internment camps. So basically, here we go. Make sure we can see it. A proposed revision to include COVID protocol under the state's Communicable and Certain Other Diseases Act outlines procedures for isolation or quarantine. The measure would allow local health officers at his other sole discretion to issue an emergency detention order causing a person or groups of persons to be immediately detained for purposes of isolation or quarantine. So, here's it, right. Health officers are required to provide documentation proving unvaccinated residents subject to detention have denied requests for medical examination. This is the same as in New Jersey, and this is why I want to point this out, right? Denied request for examination. So you've asserted your right to not be invasively investigated. That's protected under Fourth Amendment. That without a warrant, you cannot be searched. Your place cannot be searched, with the exception of exigent circumstances. And this law is being made to establish exigent circumstances. That's what it is. It's a workaround the Fourth Amendment, because you can decline, just like you can decline a breathalyzer test. Now, mind you, driving isn't a right, so declining a breathalyzer test, which is your right, can get your license revoked. But generally speaking, a cop can't just walk up to you and say, take a breathalyzer, right? You can't do that. So that's why I want to point this out. So we're denied requests for medical examination, testing, treatment. Notice that they're adding treatment. So you declined treatment. You declined to be tested. You declined treatment for the thing you declined to be tested for, right? Counseling, right? You refuse to be subject to a state agent to query and dictate to you what you should be thinking in terms of medicine. Then you have vaccination, decontamination of persons or animals, isolation, quarantine, inspection, and closure facilities prior to involuntary confinement in quarantine facilities. So again, this is similar to what's in New Jersey already. That hasn't been challenged, where the fact that you decline, as is your right, that you are, that's taken as face value, prima facie, I think they called it, evidence that you are a threat, and therefore we can just quarantine you. And of course, they can get law enforcement officials, this goes back to my previous point, to assist with the arrest of uncompliant Washington residents. Here it is. A local health officer may invoke the powers of police officers, sheriffs, constables, and all other officers and employees of any political subdivisions within the jurisdiction of the health department to enforce immediately orders given to effectuate the purpose of this section in accordance to the provisions of the RCW. So this is legalese, basically, and you see this in other legislation where they have to give permission to other departments to enforce laws. So that's not strange to see it all. The thing is what they're affecting with that. And here we have a judge may extend the forced quarantine for a period not to exceed 30 days if the segregated individual or family persists to refuse vaccination. And I don't think it's just vaccination. What they're saying is that so long as you refuse to take whatever medical treatment, a judge can take that as you are a continual threat to the community and then just keep adding 30 days. So your only way out is a judge declines to do 30 days or you take whatever medical treatment that they're forcing on. So welcome to these emergency laws. I think Barnes' law, Aviva, Fry, and Barnes was discussing this whole emergency legislation as end runs around the Constitution, and they need to be dealt with. And this is another example. Now, I want to show you this highlighted part. That's October 2019. So this was before the current pandemic, and they're amending this. So your state, your country may have such laws already in the books and you just didn't know it. And now they're flexing on you with those laws that they kept basically secret from you for your own health and safety, of course. So speaking of these vaccinations, because we're talking about the tyranny rising, here is the next step. Now, we warned you that it wasn't going to stop at 2. And a lot of you went for it because you wanted your freedoms back. No matter how oxymoronic that kind of statement is. And then you thought you were done. And I said, hey, they're gonna mandate 3rd, 4th, 5th. You don't want to believe it. Now here we go. 3.8 million fully vaccinated Australians to be declared unvaccinated. This is what we said. Right? You were fully vaccinated going into 2022, and then poof, next bomb. See, they got to get you on this subscription model. They got to get you to update the app. And that's what's going on. Here it is. The unelected Chancellor Karl Nehammer has reduced. See, they promised you what? 6 months? What's it down to? Reduce the green passport's validity to 6 months. So you thought you were in the clear. And just like the Chinese thing, it goes from green to yellow to red. That's how it goes. And when it's yellow, you got to agree up before it turns red. And now they're changing the dates. As a result, millions of citizens who were considered fully vaccinated 6 months ago are now classified as unvaccinated by the government. question. What does this do to the statistics? And we're going to get into a page with statistics. So now, unvaccinated will include a group that took no shots whatsoever, plus a group that took 2 shots, and then a new fully vaccinated group who took 3. This is going to just, I mean, the data is already bad, but it's just going to make it worse. And this is my interest in the data. So here's this, and this is what's going to happen now. So all the people who were considered fully vaccinated, they were green, right? Suddenly, only vaccinated people or those who recovered within the last 6 months can visit restaurants, hotels, shops, and access community centers and sports halls. Furthermore, the chancellor is mandating citizens to wear N95 masks in most outdoor locations. So they pulled the football from you who took 2 shots, telling you gotta take a 3rd, and they're still putting a diaper on your face. Nothing screams effective like unknown numbers of shots and a mask. And you Canadians voted for these people. And you continue to vote for these people. But that's not the only one. Because, I mean, I'm at a point now, it's not funny. It's just not cool. Hey, here's Quebec. Quebec to deny parts of the society to those without a booster passport. Vaccine passport system in Quebec will soon be updated so it only work for those who had the booster shot. The vaccine mandate was extended to include liquor stores and cannabis dispensaries. You know what that means? NFL's going to be all over the place. They mad now. They can't get their weed. They're going to be mad. The 3rd dose will be required at a later date when every Quebecer has had a chance to get it, said Health Minister Christina Dubé. Was this person elected? I'm just wondering. Who do they represent? Those without a booster shot will be blocked from some parts in society. If the unvaccinated aren't happy with this situation, there is a very simple solution at your disposal, the minister said. It is to get vaccinated. It's free. I don't understand why you won't do what I said the man beating on his wife. All you had to do was cook my dinner. That's what that is. And if you don't like what's going on, all you gotta do is just get. That's wife beater mentality right there. And they just take it. I don't know how this is acceptable. And I noticed that. That was one thing I noticed since 2020. Like politicians just talking to citizens like they're not public servants. Like the public, like, don't be a knucklehead. I seen this on a sign driving down the highway. Like, who are you talking to? I had jury duty. And it's not the first time. I've been to juries a lot of times. And I've never, other than telling us the instructions on how the jury system works and when our lunch break is up, I've never had members of the court just yell at people until I had my latest jury duty. And they were just rude. Like, who are you talking to? Luckily, the woman wouldn't talk to me because I would have talked right back to her. But she was just off the joint. And that's how these people talk.
If the unvaccinated aren't happy with this situation, there's a very simple solution at your disposal. Get vaccinated. It's free. Like people who are not vaccinated aren't vaccinated because it costs too much. Like they don't have money. It's money. And I've heard this whole thing before. It's not the first time I've seen this. Like, you may understand, it's free. Why? Yeah, what's the problem? Like, no, this is not about money. This is not about money. I don't know what to tell you. That's what this is here. By limiting the places they can go, we're limiting their contact. If you don't want to get vaccinated, stay home. Now you see, this is the aggression. This is aggression. They are aggressing against these people. You stay home. No, you stay home. I'm not worried. You're the one that's worried. The person who's worried should stay home. I'm good. See? And that's this whole backwards. This whole backwards. And they say it clear as day. That's what they want. You stay home. They want to aggress. It wasn't that want to. They are aggressing against you because you weren't being a responsible Negro. And for you white folks, and yeah, whatever. That's the thing. You're not being responsible. How dare you be irresponsible? Go to your room. Stay in your room. That's how they look at you. That's how they look at you. Like they own you. You're their property. Go to your room until you learn how to act properly. So that's that rising tyranny. It's getting worse. And I know that's outside the United States, but we're about to get ours. I honestly believe that. I'd like to be pleasantly surprised by the Supreme Court, but I just think at best they'll just say states can do it, but I don't even see that going. And for my last trip from the supermarket, if this thing goes through, if you think prices are high now, it's going to get a whole lot worse. Because remember, they're pushing it on any business with more than 100 employees. And that supermarket, yep. So last thing I want to do is talk about data coming out of the UK. I've done a number of posts where I've shown infection rates and death rates from the UK data, which is some of the best numbers. See, a lot of reports, they hide numbers per high percent or numbers per 100,000. And because most people are enumerate, they'll see that and it doesn't compute really to them. So I've had to explain that 10% of 10 is 1. Okay. But 10% of 100 is 10. So 10%, if you say a 10% is, they'll say New York, for example. They're saying how the rates are just through the roof in upstate New York. And then when you look at the numbers, you see it's like they almost half the counties in New York account for one borough in New York City. because the numbers is so when you see these high rates, like, oh my goodness, it's 10%. Okay, yeah, that means there's one person in the hospital. Just throwing that out there. Versus you've got, relatively 1,000 people in New York per, if you're comparing the counties, and 10% is 100. So you actually have more cases in New York City than you do in any county upstate. And if upstate has a problem, it's because you lack infrastructure or staffing, and that's what you need to address. But anyway, so one thing I like about the UK data is they actually give you the numbers. So we're going to look at this report, UK Health Security Agent first COVID-19 vaccine surveillance report of 2022 with collates infection rates data for the final weeks of 2021. That's weeks 49 to 52. And they comment, it's a devastating report. Now, I'm not going to quote this thing because I could get struck for misinformation. So this is an opinion piece. It's not a paper, but I'm going to touch on the data because I've seen this data. And so the first one here is these are case rates. And look at these, 1,000, 7,000, 6,000, 5,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000, 1,000. I know, I'm just rounding it, right? Vaccinate for unadjusted rates versus not vaccinated. So 2 to 1. And this is what I saw before, where the unvaccinated rates would be higher in the under 18. The cases. But then you start seeing, so vaccinated 7,000 versus 3,000, 6,000 versus 2,000, 5,000 versus 2,000, 3,000 versus 1,000, 2,000 versus 1,000. This is basically equal again. And part of the reason why this stuff for the 70 up being equal is because it's really about comorbidities. And as you age, you just start piling on these comorbidities. So you're going to see worse outcomes simply because these comorbidities are there and they've taken their toll. I mean, if you're obese for 30, 40 years, the amount of inflammation, the damage is done to you is a lot. So when we saw the throwing in one of my early videos from CNN reporting about the obesity. So this doesn't surprise me that these are almost equal. But if you look at these differences where the vaccinated persons with 2 doses are much higher than the persons not vaccinated. And that's a big deal. And I don't know if they're doing the crazy Canada thing where the 2-dose people are considered not vaccinated and throwing them in that group. I assume not. And then they go into this. It's the same thing we just saw, but they're just saying the efficacy, and just noting that again in that 18 under 38%, and again, part of the reason is that we already see low levels of cases and deaths in that group. So they're already in a good state, and all you're doing is adding to their good state. But as soon as you reach out to groups with more issues, boom, 120 minus 122%, minus 137%, minus 151%. And then you start seeing it going back down, but it's still negative. And so this is in line with the paper that I showed in the last podcast, that the research, that medical paper showed that you had a 37% effectiveness against Omicron, which means 63% of those who took 2 shots and a booster were being affected by Omicron. And this kind of bears that out. That just what you're seeing, that is not being effective. And again, that's the data coming out of England, and I've seen that a number of times. And you can go back into the blog and see our earlier reports pre-booster that shows some interesting things. So here we go, unvaccinated. I think this goes back to the paper. Yeah, it goes back to the paper, so I don't want to go over that. But here's their daily cases for Wales, at least one, how many doses, boosters, and here's all the case numbers, and it's straight up, which, yeah, again, I'll go back to the Supreme Court arguments that I was listening to, and I don't understand how you get a chart like this. And a chart like that should be presented as evidence. And how you look at that kind of chart, this kind of chart, with this straight up, and say, yeah, an OSHA rule is going to help. I don't see how you can do that. And that's why I say the whole argument going about, does the statute allow this? Is this a general question? Is a major question? Should Congress be doing this as a break? No, the statute is not effective, period, because we've seen the data. So we don't impose things on people that don't meet the aims of the supposed mandate. That's my take. But they're not doing that. So that's what we're stuck with. So I just wanted to bring that out there. I think that should be everything. That should be everything. And okay. I gotta make a correction. So this piece, and you probably were yelling at the screen that it's Austrians. So it is Austria, where this. So I was doing Austria and Australia and Canada. And I'm just saying Austria has been just crazy with this stuff. I should have known when I looked at the flag. Like, I was like, that's not an Australian flag. But anyway, that's, they're doing the same thing everywhere. And I did notice one pattern. A lot of these countries at the forefront of the tyranny are ex-Nazi states, ex-fascist states, ex-communist states, ex-prison colonies. I just happen to notice, and if they were in the Nazi film, it was if you were colonized by the Nazis, you had this kind of stuff. I just happen to notice that a lot of these countries, again, fell into one of those ex-Nazi, ex-fascist, ex-communist, or current communist, or ex-prison colony. And I don't think that's accidental. because there's a lot mentally going on to become a Nazi or fascist state to begin with, or to be a prisoner or a prison warden who has a habit of ruling over people and then imposing these kinds of things. I don't find that strange in the least bit, and that pattern jumped out at me. So I just wanted to correct that, because I know I said Australia. I should have said Austria, and I can read. So anyway, this is going to end this session of Garvey's Ghost TV. Thanks for joining. Hope you enjoy watching. Ding and ding and ding.